Our first speaker is Tila Jacob and Philip Schulter, and they are speaking on why should victims be victimized twice. For those of us who work with victims, we see it happening over and over and over again. And for many of us, maybe like me, I often feel powerless as to what I can do to prevent it. So at this point, I would like to throw it over to Tila.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Tila Jacob and I oversee the Attenti Monitoring Department. ANZ Mental Health wanted something to demonstrate stronger actions and invited Attenti to create an event to be presented at this conference. In support of this call for strong words, stronger actions, Attenti made a commitment to those words and worked with selected volunteers to complete a live trial. Why should victims be victimised twice? What do we mean by this? The answer is victims should not be victimised twice. Why do we not choose to use the technology available in today's world to assist and combat family violence incidents from happening time and time again? From my own personal experience, an ABO or protection order alone is not enough to stop a perpetrator determined to reach victims or family members. Over the next 40 minutes, we will take you through the program, from ANZ Mental Health's call for volunteers through to their feedback, and involve them in a live Q&A at the end of the session. Now, to introduce our valiant volunteers, we have Alison and Amanda, Shana and Tristan, and Suzanne and Mandy. We were overwhelmed by the response for volunteers, but could only select a few. As one of the operators during this trial, I had some interesting conversations and a few candid moments with them during the trial. I would like to thank all our fantastic volunteers. Attenti Global is a provider of technology and services to government sectors and support agencies dedicated to keeping families and the community safe. Our mission is to create a positive social impact. We do this in multiple ways, by providing safety nets for people at risk, breaking the cycle of recidivism, and helping people overcome alcohol abuse as a large contributor to family harm issues. Our proximity and alcohol monitoring technology assists families and support agencies who struggle with the fight against domestic violence. Our bilateral monitoring is already in use globally by tens of thousands of people, proving its effectiveness and success. The technology used to locate the position of the victim and perpetrator at any time via GPS measures the distance between the victim or perpetrator, the direction and speed travelled, and notify the monitoring centre if proximity zones have been breached, for example, the victim's home zone or place of work. This gives the support agency and victims up-to-date information with enough time for safety action plans to be activated to keep the victim safe and help stop this continuous cycle. It allows the victim the reassurance that his 24/7 monitoring team dedicated to their safety is always watching over them. Let's give back victims their freedom to rebuild and live their lives. Strong words, stronger actions. Now to the trial. In a short period of time, the Attenti projects team worked with the ANZ Mental Health to organise a live trial of our bilateral equipment. Victims were asked to submit their interest and their reasons why as part of the selection process. Within weeks, there were countless online meetings and phone calls with volunteers, project team meetings, equipment testing, operations SOPs written, setup of test monitoring centre, training of test operators, equipment sent to volunteers. The trial was over 3 days during business hours. Each pair represented either a victim or perpetrator and was advised a team will be monitoring their movements, and when they crossed paths or activated proximity breach alerts, they would be contacted. This was a test environment, so no emergency services were called. When volunteers did come within range of each other to activate an alert, they were called, advised in a real-life scenario. There would be a customised safety action plan for the victim already in place for an operator to action immediately. Next, we will play recorded clips of our volunteers speaking for a few minutes each of their experiences. You will see how they felt through the eyes of a victim or perpetrator using the bilateral equipment. This was an amazing experience to hear firsthand from our volunteers involved in the trial. Following this will be our next presenter, Philip Schluter. If we can play the video, please. Thank you.
Good morning. My name's Alison Sineski. I'm a sergeant in the Queensland Police Service. I'm currently the Domestic and Family Violence Coordinator for the South Burnett Patrol Group here in Queensland. And part of my role is looking after 11 police stations in the patrol group. Why was it important to me to be part of this trial? It was because I wanted to know what it was like being a perpetrator in this role wearing an electronic monitoring device. As a police officer, I have been trained in the fitting of these devices that we use in the Queensland Police Service. The equipment that has been supplied during this trial is completely different to what we use here. This equipment included a device where a victim was contacted if I entered the exclusion zone wearing this equipment. So being part of the trial was really important to get a better background understanding of how, once it's fitted, it works. What did I get out of the program? These devices are fitted to serious offenders for whatever reason. They're not just fitted to your normal everyday person, they're fitted to serious offenders. I was the perpetrator in this trial. Knowing that somebody always had eyes on me was actually quite thought-provoking because I knew I was being watched. As the perpetrator in the trial, it was my choice if I abided by being telephoned by the monitoring device saying, hey, you've entered an exclusion zone. I also knew that if I did enter that exclusion zone, that my victim was going to get a phone call as well. So it was good knowing that I always had those eyes on me and that someone was watching me, and that if I did the wrong thing, not only myself would get contacted, but also the victim. Being a perpetrator, education is key when wearing these devices, because if they're not going to abide by the exclusion zones, the conditions that are put on them for wearing these devices, then that's their choice. As a police officer, knowing that these perpetrators are being watched by the monitoring companies, is really good because we can assist our victims better with these devices being worn by the perpetrators. Also, knowing how to better liaise with my prosecutors in requesting these devices through magistrates when the perpetrators are going through the court process it was really good information to get out of the trial, knowing how the whole system works now. So being monitored by the company and knowing how they work, wearing the device, knowing how it works, and then knowing how you can be contacted if you do actually breach any of the exclusion zones that are put on you. So I got a lot out of this trial, and I was really happy to be part of it. So thank you.
My name is Amanda Ponapalli. I work as a senior social worker at Community Sherbrooke Health, which the organisation is Queensland Health. The reason that I volunteered to be a part of this trial was just to, one, try something new, but also to try and gain a better understanding of the experience of victims. I've worked in a generalist role, but have a lot of engagement with people who are experiencing domestic and family violence in a frontline capacity, but also in the capacity of multi-agency safety planning meetings for victims of domestic and family violence. I have not had much experience with people using electronic tracking devices before, so I was just very open to learning about what that experience would be like and the value of that technology. I received some phone calls knowing that the respondent was very close to me. Some of those phone calls I was in a secure facility, like in my workplace, but other phone calls I was out in the open. I also had the experience, I've got 3 young children, so where I got a phone call that the respondent was close by when I had 3 children in the shops. So again, it helps me be prepared and it helps me be emotionally prepared as well, instead of being caught by surprise So the calls that are coming through are relevant to his proximity to me. So I don't receive any calls unless he's nearby. So it's not time consuming in that regard. The calls are relevant, and the calls, when I received them, were very clear in regards to had there been a real safety plan in place, in regards to some of that onus and responsibility is taken off me because the plan, I was made aware by the comms centre that the plan would already be in place. So in certain situations, for example, police would already be on their way to me as per prior agreement. One of the things that I felt I liked about this particular product was that there's an accountability on the respondent as well in regards to this device. So I became aware throughout the trial that the respondent is also getting notifications when he's entered my proximity, and so reflecting on that as a worker, not necessarily as a victim, that gives opportunity for the respondents to make the decision to comply with their orders and comply with the expectations.
So my name is Shanna White. I am a psychologist, a clinical consultant, and the CEO of Cognitive Behavioural Education. And my partner in real life, Tristan, and I participated in this research. Now, in this instant, as we were real partners in real life, we actually flipped the switch on the gender norms, and I acted in the space of perpetrator, and Tristan acted in the space of victim, and we had some interesting experiences. So I was motivated to do this coming from a history of domestic violence myself, but also coming from a space of advocate. So I actually sit with women, and I have a lot of people that I work with who operate in this space. And I loved the idea of knowing that there could be something, there might be something that could actually keep them safe. What about you, Bug? Why did you want to do this with me?
I feel, as myself, I feel that the justice system in Australia doesn't do enough for sort of perpetrators, or sorry, for the victim more or less, in the way of just keeping them safe. I thought it was an excellent opportunity to trial the equipment out, and I was sort of pleasantly surprised on how well it actually worked.
The only time I ever sort of encountered it was when I was coming home after I finished clinic for the day, and they'd ring me and go, "You're getting close to a zone." And they were really clear. These are the steps. You need to get out of here. You need to turn this direction and go over there. So what happened? Like when you were going, remember when you were going in and you were going into the gym?
Yeah, drove to the gym, but within the radius of where the thing actually picks it up.
Yeah.
One of the girls gave me a call. And basically alerted me that
He told you were coming into my zone.
Yeah, basically they rang me, told me I was just about the impact coming towards your zone. They were very clear on what they wanted me to do. They gave me alternate routes to sort of veer me off in another direction.
Oh really?
And they were pretty good actually with explaining. You're in danger, and just divert. Go to the safest place you possibly can. Obviously, it is a lockup. So
but it'd be really important. Like if that was real life, and someone rings you and says you're going into that person's space, you'd feel really anxious.
Oh, definitely.
You want them to be really clear.
Yeah, and they were. It was I was quite surprised how clear and precise they were with it.
Yeah, wow. Okay. So I didn't actually know this. I didn't know that this was happening in the role of perpetrator. Yeah. I was sitting in my clinic. I am sitting with clients. I am working away. I had no idea. And I reckon, I'm just thinking as we're sort of talking now, for a victim, even though I acted in the role of perpetrator, for a victim, that would make me feel really safe. Again, not just the monitoring part, but also knowing that the perpetrator has no idea.
Yes. Yeah, 100%.
That makes sense. So you're being protected and taken care of, but it's not like the perpetrator has any idea that you're close to them or anything like that.
No idea whatsoever. It's found really, I suppose, protected and safe. Just sort of having someone that sort of got your back. Sort of, it's almost sort of like having Big Brother up there watching down and,
In a nurturing, lovely
yes,
way.
yes. Like
A non-scary way.
guardian angel, big brother. I found that I felt confident and safe, and I could go out and do my daily things, knowing that if for some reason I was going to come across the perpetrator.
Highly recommend.
Definitely, highly recommend it.
So my name's Mandy. I work for the Centre Against Domestic Abuse, and my roles there are a counsellor and a court support worker. So I mainly work with women, supporting them through domestic violence applications and also counselling, emotional support, safety planning, things like that. A reason for, I guess, wanting to join the trial was because we're constantly talking to clients who are quite fearful and scared of the person using violence against them, and they don't know what their movements are or where they are. And I suppose I wanted to be able to give feedback to our clients about what these tracking devices look like and how effective they may be, whether or not they increase safety for the women that we deal with. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Suzanne. I work at Uniting Care in the Men's Choosing Change program. I guess some other services call it Men's Behaviour Change programs. I've been doing this role for a very long time, and I work mainly with men who choose to use violence. And so I'd like to do this trial because it would give me valuable insight into my client group that I work with on a daily basis.
I didn't realise that I guess I would be the one getting all the phone calls. So when I was starting to receive them, I was thinking it kind of felt a little inconvenient because I was the one who was being told that I had to move myself away from the situation because it looked like I was the one going towards the person wearing the ankle bracelet. But then I also thought I do feel a bit safer because of the fact that he's not knowing where I am. So, and I understand that not alerting him to the victim's whereabouts is probably more important than them actually ringing him and alerting him to where you are. So yeah, I was surprised by that. Obviously, Suzanne was really good to work with, and she was trying to stalk me as well as she could. So it kind of felt like I was watching over my shoulder, which I would imagine so many of our women have to deal with on a daily basis, whether it be at their home, at the children's school, at their workplace, at wherever it may be. So I think that she really did try to cover all areas.
When you are stalking the survivor or the victim, you don't often get told that they're around. And clearly that's obviously because if I knew that, I'd hang around a lot longer. And I was getting really disappointed that I knew that the survivor's movements, I knew where she'd be going roughly, and I still couldn't get close enough to her to let her know how much I cared. And hopefully she would take me back, but the equipment prevented me from doing that. So I was very, very upset. But it involves a lot of energy as someone who's stalking, to stalk someone. And that was valuable insight for me to learn with my work. All the planning and trying to be in certain vicinities and waiting around and the expense of gifts, in case you do catch up with them, so there's a lot of work and effort that actually goes into it. But I think the longer the trial would have gone, I would have lost interest because I just wouldn't get it close enough to her.
You feel like, someone's got your back and they're watching out for you, and that, he won't get within those radiuses and you'll be able to put your safety plan into action before he even gets close enough to do anything.
With the monitoring service picking up on it and then perhaps passing on that information, whether that's to probation and parole or police or child safety or whichever service they needed to, he would get the message very loud and clear that he is being checked up on, and he has been caught, and he needs to stop this behaviour. So I think then he would follow, because he'd be worried about that if he kept breaching, what that might mean for him, what the consequences might be.
Much. Thank you, Tila. Also, especially thank you to our trial participants, from whom you've just heard a very powerful 15 minutes of first-hand experience during the trial. Now, three things do particularly stand out to me, which I guess could be summed up as that the victims were reassured and felt safe. We heard from the perpetrators that they felt accountable and conscious of the consequences of breaching the order, and that the solution, and particularly as Mandy's and Suzanne's attempts to stalk each other were thwarted, that the solution was very effective at keeping perpetrator and victim apart. I will move on to my part of the presentation. My name is Philip Schluter. I'll talk a bit about the technical aspects of the solution and how we set up the trial and what we learned from it. I'll also show you some examples of trails which will relate to what you just heard from our participants. As you saw, the trial had three groups. Each group had one victim and one aggressor. The victim was given the safety unit, which is the unit that you see on the left, the white unit. This unit is a bit smaller than a mobile phone. It's fully secure and is carried by the victim whenever she's out and about. The unit will alert the victim should the perpetrator approach. The unit also has a panic function, is fully voice capable, and is fully secure, so it cannot be used by the perpetrator to put some software on it to track the victim. The perpetrators were given the equipment on the right-hand side, and the tag, as you can see, there's a black tag, is attached to the perpetrator's ankle, fully tamper-proof and securely attached. The GPS unit is carried in the same way as the victim unit. However, as the GPS unit and the tag are tethered together, an alert will be generated if the perpetrator does not carry the unit. In essence, the perpetrator is on the unit all the time, whilst it's really up to the victim to carry the unit if she wants to. Both perpetrator and victim units continuously register their GPS position and update our Sydney-based server, which calculates the distance between the perpetrator and the victim. If the distance falls below a set threshold, alerts are generated. There are three thresholds in particular. The first is a warning level, which when breached alerts the monitoring center, so they go in and assess the situation. The second is an alert level, at which point the monitoring center will call either the perpetrator or the victim, depending on the situation. And the third level generates an immediate alert at the victim's device. This was the configuration during the trial. We obviously made no calls to emergency services, and many other configuration options are available depending on each individual's requirements. The key to the effectiveness of Attenti's solution is that the distance between perpetrator and victim is continuously and dynamically monitored. This allows the victim to go about her daily routine in the community without fear of being approached by the perpetrator. The Attenti solution also offers fixed zones, so we can place exclusion zones around the victim's residence, work, school, etc., to ensure that the perpetrator does not visit when the victim is not around. The Attenti solution is forensically secure and has been tested in courts to support prosecution of breaches. Over the next 3 slides, you will see what it looks like from the system side when proximity breaches occur. In this trail, you will see Alison in the role of aggressor and Amanda in the role of the victim. Alison's position is marked by the large red circle, which is 4 kilometers in radius. Inside is a purple circle, which is 1 kilometer in radius. These represent the first and second level alerts I described earlier. Amanda is the aggressor, and her position is that small green arrow, this one here, just to the south. So I'll manually measure the distance, to give you an idea, it's also in the little green box in the bottom, just to give you an idea of the scale that we're working at. It's about 30 kilometers. As you can see now, Amanda, the aggressor, is starting to move towards Alison, the victim. So this is an example of the aggressor approaching the victim. Watch the green distance box in the bottom right-hand corner. How it changes from green to yellow and then to red when the proximity is breached. So as you can see, we are moving towards each other, and as chance happens, Alison moves out of Amanda's way, but now we have the breach. Here we go. You can see how it turns yellow. That's when the monitoring center checks it, and then red when the alerts are generated, when the monitoring center makes the phone calls. Of course, it's vastly sped up to be within a minute. You wouldn't be able to cover that sort of ground in 1 minute. So now we have an example of where the victim approaches the aggressor. Again, the victim's position is easily seen in the large red and purple circles, and the aggressor's position is that green arrow just where it says Wollongong. I'll just point it out with a mouse now. This is Shanna and Tristan, and you heard earlier from them that Tristan was on his way to the gym and Shanna was sitting in her office. So we see now that Tristan, the victim, is going about his chores, is driving around, and so far no alert's been generated. The system continuously keeps track of the distance between the victim and the aggressor. The aggressor has not moved. The aggressor is in clinic, as we heard. But what happens next when Tristan is going to the gym? You can see the distance is breached and the alerts are generated. And in this case, as you heard earlier, the monitoring center called the victim to advise, and the aggressor, Shanna in this case, was not aware of the victim's presence. In the final example, we'll have a look at what a chance encounter might look like. This is now Suzanne and Mandy. Suzanne is stopping at the shops, the aggressor coming down from the north, stopping at the shops, and Mandy's driving past. The victim got the call, but was in the car and had no intention to stop. So it was not actually a breach. I mean, the distance was breached, but technically the order wouldn't have been breached because there was no intention of meeting anybody in this case. So this is what we'd call a chance encounter. So the three trials relate directly to the experience described by the participants and highlight how important situational awareness and operational experience are to provide an effective and safe monitoring program. So I'll quickly recap some key items from the trial setup. The trial was a collaboration with ANZ Mental Health to showcase opportunity for real action to stop the worst of domestic violence happening. We were quite overwhelmed by the response we received from volunteers to participate, including representatives from many sectors and geographical locations. Attenti provided the know-how, the systems and devices, as well as the monitoring. The data we collected during the trial included quantitative measurements, such as the trails that we just showed in the events, as well as qualitative data, such as the individual and in meaningful participant feedback that we saw earlier. We were working with some common parameters throughout the trial, which included things like the proximity. I described that. So the proximity buffer is 3,000 meters. I mentioned that radius 4 kilometers earlier because that's in addition to the GPS proximity of 1,000 meters. And in addition to that, we also used an RF proximity, which is a further safeguard where the victim is automatically alerted. At no point in the trial, of course, were emergency services contacted, although in a real-world application, such calls would have been made during the trial. The trial would not have been possible without the 6 participants, each of whom undertook to work with ANZ Mental Health and Attenti to ensure the trial produced useful data. And I'd like, again, to thank the participants for their level of involvement, which included being monitored for 3 days, simulating real-world scenarios, even wearing a tag in the role of the aggressor, and at the end recording their impressions and making themselves available today. This was not a trivial undertaking for anyone. Clearly, every trial has constraints. Our main constraint was time. The trial itself only took 3 days and was concluded not even 2 weeks ago. We also had to prepare the entire project over video links, including training the participants, including aggressors, to self-fit the tag. Clearly, the volunteers were not court-ordered to participate, and as said, we made no police calls. So in terms of learnings, the main learning that stands out to me is that there is a huge interest in exploring the possibility of using proximity alarms to combat domestic violence. Clearly, there is a need for a solution, and the trial showed at the very least that what we can offer today will address some urgent needs for some, if not most, victims in immediate danger of their partners. And with that, I'd like to introduce Stephen Mockett, our moderator for the next segment.
Very powerful presentation. I was fortunate enough to have a look at this yesterday, and I do have some questions I'd like to introduce. Philomena, I think, also is able to take questions from the conference floor. So as a starting point, Taylor, that was all very positive. What were the criticisms or complaints that you had from participants? Were there any negatives associated with it?
Just going through and having discussions with both parties in regards to the alerts, why the victim was being called instead of the perpetrator was probably the most asked question. I would say it was just going through those discussions and sharing the information so that they were well informed, and making sure that they understood the reason why the perpetrator was not contacted. Obviously, for their own safety, it's better to have them move than to notify a perpetrator. So yeah, that would probably be the main one.
Okay. Well, both I think both Amanda and Mandy raised the point that in different ways that at some stage they felt annoyed that they were getting called while they were getting called, and then came to a view that, hang on a minute, it's better this way. Would one of you expand on that, how that felt and what that rationale was? Because it seems to me that that probably is, from what you've said at the in the videos that we just heard, gave you perhaps more of a sense of empowerment in the process than the other way of doing it has. Perhaps Mandy,
yes, Stephen, I can say that it just felt like a little frustrating that I was the one who was having to move myself out of the perpetrator's way rather than the other way around, and it kind of felt like it doesn't make the perpetrator accountable for the things that they're doing wrong. But then when you look at the bigger picture and realise that it's, you know, it is more important for your safety for the perpetrator to not know your location, you realise why it's then important that you get those calls instead of the perpetrator.
Yeah. Is that how you felt about it too, Amanda?
Yeah, I felt informed about, like I felt in control and informed, but what I felt, if I placed myself in the role of a victim, was that ongoing burden of someone else's actions. So in the context that I was in, I was receiving some phone calls when I was with patients. I was receiving phone calls when I was in the shop with 3 kids. So the decision to disclose what the conversations are about with people that are with you and the implications in relation to that felt like a burden to be managed because of someone else's actions. So I could really identify with victims, like when the relationship's over or there's safety plans in place, that's not necessarily assured to be the case always. So that's where it sort of feels like it's empowering because you've got the support from the team. And the device is excellent, but that burden as well, sort of if I forget the device one day, how would that impact me not feeling that secure, or if I'm with other people and they're impacted by a pending situation or emergency services being called. So there's a lot there, I assume, emotionally as well in regards to managing that risk ongoing.
Yeah, thank you for that. And Alison, you made a comment about getting better informed, my words, not yours, with respect to, and I guess, encouraging prosecutors to take a view on the use of technology. What was your feeling at the end of the trial, having gone into it with that hope?
Well, I suppose the devices that we use here in Queensland is a device where if like a perpetrator is looking at going to prison for the offences that have occurred, their last chance of wearing one of these devices and staying out of prison is, I suppose, something that the prosecutor and magistrate have to try and work out between themselves in the courtroom. The prosecutor has to be able to request the use of these devices on the perpetrator to keep them out of prison as a last resort. And I suppose the perpetrator's defence would be asking for that equipment to be used at the, at the same time to keep them out of prison. So it's either they wear the device, stay out of prison, and stay off remand and abide by the exclusions that are put on them, or the opposite, they go to prison, stay on remand until everything's finalised through the court process.
Yeah, thank you. And I think, Suzanne, you said that you took the opportunity to try carrying on wearing the tag for a wee while after the trial to see whether it made you feel scrutinised. What was your experience with that?
Me personally, I didn't have any negative experiences wearing the tag. After the trial had been finalised, I went to really busy shopping centres. I went to affluent areas. I went and got a pedicure done with it on. I went and did numerous different tasks, childcare centres, whatever, with the ankle bracelet on to see what people or the members of the public's reactions would be to it. And generally speaking, most people didn't know what the device was. Because I stopped a few people and said, oh, have you noticed the ankle bracelet? Do you know what it is? So I found that quite interesting.
Thank you very much. I'll hand over to Philip very briefly just to close as to what happens next. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. This brief trial was what we would see as being a beginning for Australia and New Zealand. And we would like for anyone who sees opportunity in their organisation to continue this work to reach out to us. My name is Philip Schluter, and I look forward to hearing from you.